Hello and welcome back to Star Wars Culture Talk. I'm your host, Hannah, and Star Wars has always been a frontrunner for creating beautiful art in cinema. And that has impacted so many creators and has always inspired so many to create with feeling and emotion. And today, my guest will immerse us in the world of Star Wars artistry. Joe and Brian, welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, well, it's going to be such a great interview. I'm so excited to get to know more of what you guys have been up to and what you've got coming up as well. But I like to start every interview the same. I asked all my guests the same question of what is your relationship to Star Wars? This gets us to know you a little bit more. So tell us just briefly a bit about, when you first saw Star Wars, when you first fell in love with it, and what it means for you now. Joe, I'll throw this one first to you. Your relationship with Star Wars.
I mean, it's been part of my life since, practically day one. I saw the first Star Wars film when I was barely 4 years old. It was, I think, the first movie my parents had taken me to see in the theater. So, so it's just before my 4th birthday in 1977. So, it's such Star Wars is really just kind of integrated into my DNA because it hit me at such an early age, just right at that right point where as a small kid my imagination is just starting to take off. So I'm a Star Wars kid from day one. Like, I grew up with it. Every Christmas was a Star Wars Christmas, even those in between years. So it's just been a constant in my life. I knew someday that I wanted to do Star Wars art eventually. Once I got into late high school, early college, that was a goal of mine to eventually either do comics or Star Wars illustration, or maybe Star Wars art for the movies someday. Or, I don't know, but they were publishing Star Wars art around that time. So I saw that as an opportunity to maybe eventually contribute something. And then it took off from there, basically.
Yeah. Just dying to get into it. I love that. I love that so much. And Brian, what about you?
Abbreviated version.
I like it.
Well, my father was a mechanic for both cars and airplanes. And so I grew up just surrounded by all this mechanical stuff. And I remember, I always say this, I can't remember if I saw the movie first or got the toy first, but he got me the toy of Luke's land speeder. And I remember in the movie seeing the land speeder hovering over the Tatooine desert.
Yeah.
And that just tied in all of my childhood curiosity for all this automobile stuff that my father did with the Star Wars universe. And so that was maybe one of the earliest memories of how it hooked me in and gave me a connection with my father and Star Wars to where it was something we could both share and both talk about. And he thought it was cool and I thought it was cool. And so, as a kid, it's not easy to relate to the adults around you. And you have this all of a sudden this connection where you can talk to them and feel closer to them. And so it was just this really magical moment. And so, I think that's one of the earliest memories of my connection to Star Wars.
Yeah, that's and the amazing thing is there's such similarity in both of your experiences, and I think there's going to be a similarity for a lot of people where it sparks this imagination and it's very wondrous, and Star Wars was this wondrous creative thing that often as a small child, when you first see it, you are very amazed with the mechanics of it and how does this work and how does that ship fly and why is that alien, where does that alien live. I love that so much. It's spark of imagination for a lot of people. I love that. And furthermore, and Joe, what you were saying before, this obviously led to you wanting to work in Star Wars, and both of you now working within the Star Wars inverse galaxy, working with Lucasfilm and being artists in your own right. Tell us a little bit about how both of you got involved with Lucasfilm and Star Wars and where that journey first began.
I guess I'll go first. My first sort of getting my feet wet officially with Star Wars
Mm.
came right after I graduated art college. So we're talking in the mid 90s, and there wasn't a whole lot of Star Wars happening. This is just before the special editions were released in
Yeah.
1997.
Oh, the
So
dark times.
yeah, so we're still kind of at the very end of the dark times when Star Wars had kind of,
Mm.
after Return of the Jedi, after
Yeah, it's kind of had
1984,
that.
when Kenner stopped making new toys, and then, or maybe 85, but then there wasn't a whole lot happening other than in 1988, West End Games put out the Star Wars role-playing game. And I was as soon as I went into the comic book store and I saw these new Star Wars books, I got excited because they were the first new Star Wars anything I had seen, and they had Star Wars little pewter miniatures that you could paint and collect and do your role-playing game adventures with. So I was in high school and I'm like, oh my God, new Star Wars books. This is great.
Yeah.
So I started collecting those and playing those books with friends and those games. And then that carried through to college, and they were producing these books for up until I graduated in technically 95, but it was summer when I walked for 96. So anyway, I graduated. I sent out a portfolio to this publisher because I was familiar with their books, and then they ended up hiring me to illustrate for some of their Star Wars books, freelance, to do illustrations. So I worked for that publisher for a couple of years, and that was some of my very first published work as well. I had done some independent comic book work just prior to that, but that was sort of my first. That was my first official Star Wars work.
First taste,
yeah. So that, and then about a year or two later, the Star Wars Special Edition had come out. And then that sort of kicked up the energy and the excitement for the Star Wars trilogy all over again for an entire new generation. So, and I was just kind of getting the ball rolling with my Star Wars art career, and Star Wars just kicked off again. And I came in right at a really good time when the fandom was sort of reignited. And then I illustrated a bunch of books for that publisher, and that led to work for Lucasfilm directly, and then Star Wars Insider magazine, and some other publishing outlets, and eventually like Dark Horse Comics and some other people. But that's kind of how I got my start.
Yeah, and so the saga continues. And
It never ended.
You've got this, exactly.
It just kept going. Yeah.
I love that so much. And Brian, you as well. Where at what point did you get involved with Lucasfilm? And also, actually, at the end of this, I also want to ask how you two first met and when you first got connected as well.
Well, this is part of Brian's story, actually.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'll connect those dots. I was already working in the world of comic books, and a mutual friend of ours, Justin Chung, invited me to Mid-Ohio Con. And I went there and was showing off all the stuff that I was doing. And I met this guy, Joe Corroney, who had sat there at Comic-Con with all this cool Star Wars stuff. And we got along great. But it was like another, probably, I don't know, close to 10 years before we would work together. And I think Joe was he was just swamped with projects. And so Justin had mentioned to him, he's like, well, Brian's already working in comics, like coloring all this comic book artwork and for Marvel and DC and everybody, he could probably help you out. And so Joe approached me, and he was doing the illustration, and I would do the coloring on his artwork. And we tag teamed and worked together for over a decade. And I learned so much from him, not just about Star Wars, but about composition and value and visual storytelling. And so, our friendship kind of intertwined into this like Padawan and Jedi Master kind of situation where I'm learning from him. And because of Joe, I got to work on, all these crazy things with him, like Star Wars Insider, all the way comics and Topps trading cards and everything. So, I had this career already that didn't really involve Star Wars. And because of Joe, I was able to really follow my passion and get into Star Wars. So it was really all because of him.
And
that's incredible. Yeah.
I'll add to that, Brian's Master Padawan reference. He was, as much as he might have been learning from me, in terms of like storytelling or composition or design. Like I was learning from him. It was very symbiotic because he's a master illustrator and colorist himself. So, I mean, I was coloring and painting my own work prior to working with Brian, but I learned so much just from working with him. For the next 10 years, we worked on hundreds of comic book covers and hundreds of Star Wars illustrations. And so I was learning his aesthetic and his color sense and even some of his design sense as well. So it was, we had a really great, I don't know, just a simpatico going with.
It was a good collaboration.
Yeah. Like we were friends and we were professionals, but we also respected each other's aesthetics and worth ethics. And it just, I don't know, it just worked out really well.
Yeah. It sounds very Obi-Wan and Anakin. I felt like Obi-Wan started learning from Anakin at one point there, and who was the master? They were both teaching each other.
Yeah, it always reminds me of like what Qui-Gon was saying, how the Force is symbiotic, and it kind of it's cyclical, and it's kind of how our illustration relationship was in that sense, I would say. But and we still definitely feed off each other in that regard too. So.
Because I was going to talk about and ask about your actual individual styles as well, and you talk about how you actually worked quite closely with coloring and texturing each other's works. Let's talk about the individual styles, but also how that influenced you influenced each other. Brian, I want to walk through a couple of your works because you've got this fantastic, almost like a poster of social justice going for us, and we've got this one of my favorites here is this is almost like propaganda for the Empire, which I love it.
That's it. You got it.
So talk us through the style of this kind of poster worthy, you want people to know about something. Why do you kind of go down this style, and what influenced you for the style?
Well, I'm definitely influenced by like all things vintage and retro. It could be something 50 years old or 100 years old, but I'm just kind of always got my eyes open and taking in everything from mid-century modern advertising to Art Nouveau artwork, and everything in between, national parks posters and travel posters and all that kind of thing. And I'm just like a sponge. I'm just like, I absorb all of that. And so when it came to Star Wars, I really wanted to take all of the sort of aesthetic things that speak to me and bring that into the Star Wars universe in a way that hopefully feels like natural and believable. So like with the Vader one that you like specifically, it's definitely, we're going for that sort of like, that World War II propaganda aesthetic, recruitment, come join the Empire. I can
see this hanging on the walls of Coruscant. I can see it there. This is great. Yeah.
Well, and that's the goal. I want it to be like it really is in the Star Wars universe. And I think that's kind of what separates it from some of the other propaganda stuff you might see, where some things are with a wink. And I didn't want there to be a wink in the artwork. I wanted it to play like this is something the Empire really made and put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually just the detail of one of these artworks, they might vary, but can you tell us briefly from the birth of an idea, the concept you first get, to the finished product? How long is that process for you, and how long would that take you?
I mean, it can vary from project to project, especially with Disney and Lucasfilm, involved with approvals and everything. But, it can be anywhere from a few months to a year. Just from when I put something in my sketch. Well, actually, the Star Wars Celebration piece is a perfect example. I put that in my sketchbook in like 2019, but it's just now going to be released on May the 2nd, right? So just from when you first have that initial idea to where you can present it to Lucasfilm and then have them want to do something with it can take years sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So it is quite a process. And similarly, we'll juxtapose this, but also talk about the similarities between them. Joe, your artwork and style is, obviously everyone has their own flair and kind of emotion behind yours. So talk us through your style and your influence what made you kind of create these kind of styles of artworks?
Well, I think I've always been influenced because Star Wars is first and foremost a cinematic experience, because when we think of Star Wars, we think of the original films, and that was sort of the guiding force, whether I realized it or not. As an illustrator, I mean, I started out very comic book and cartoon style in my very early independent comic work, but as I started to do more license work, which really began very early with my Star Wars artwork career, I was starting to push for a little bit more realism and reference-based artwork, where if I'm going to draw Boba Fett or if I'm going to draw Darth Vader, I wanted it to look like the characters. I didn't really want to stylize them too much, because what I responded to was the sort of the cinematic feel in artists who are like Drew Struzan or Ralph McQuarrie. I mean, even though I was just as influenced by comic book artists as well, and that I think is where I might get that flair that you're talking about, because I'm very, very much a comic book illustrator, even though I'm not illustrating comics currently or recently, but I spent a long career just my whole childhood is comic books, and like Brian's. And so I brought, I guess, comic book sensibilities to the realism that I was pushing into, that I wanted my artwork to feel cinematic. I wanted my artwork, when you looked at it, I mean, this is very realistic. The style I'm doing now is very realism based, but it wasn't always that intense either. Like, it was something I gradually kept building and building and building towards. So it's just I think that's probably the best explanation. I have comic book influences, but I also have realism influences with certain illustrators as well. So
definitely.
It's been fun to kind of blend the two influences over the years to kind of find my voice, I would say.
Well, I think you can see Joe's comic book influences in how dynamic his poses are. Some other illustrators might, do something that's photo referenced but very stiff. And Joe's pose is really so dynamic, and you can really feel the energy and the weight and the characters and the motion if they're, wielding a weapon or something. And I really think that's what separates him from a lot of other people.
I appreciate that.
Kind of like this Ahsoka one, when you were just saying that, I thought, well, you can feel the kind of the movement in this pose that Ahsoka's doing. That's a really good point. And I think that's another thing, is what I'm getting from this artwork is a lot of like emotion. And I think obviously the use of color is a really big, player in creating these kinds of works. And also the symbolism of each element that's on the artwork is quite an important thing. But I kind of want to keep going with this to talk about, actually, for the viewers and the audience watching this, what if you had to give someone advice of how to actually get into the world of artistry, and if they're so interested in creating artworks themselves, what would be both of your advice and kind of notes to take on from your experience? Brian, I'll go with you first. If you had to kind of help someone along their artistic journey, what would you give them?
I think this is a tough question, because sometimes Joe or I or other artists, we make what we do look easy, and we make it look easy because we've done it for tens of thousands of hours. And so you could be at a comic book convention or a Star Wars convention, and someone sees your artwork and they're like, oh, I want to do that. And some people can, right? Some people can put in the effort and put in the time and put in the hard work. But whether you're a musician that has to practice their songs or an athlete who has to practice their sport, art is the same way, right? You have to put in the repetitions and you have to do the work, and you have to draw every day or paint every day or whatever it is. And so to me, that's the number one thing to try to express to people, is that, if it's a parent that brings their child up and says, oh, my child wants to be an artist, it's just like, just draw something every day. It doesn't even really matter what it is. just draw every day and get in that habit of, drawing, painting, coloring with your crayons, whatever it is, just do it every day, because that's how you build up that sort of artistic muscle, for lack of a better word. And that is also what separates the people who succeed in art from those who maybe give up or it doesn't work out for them, is that, if it's just something you try to do once a month or 4 times a year, it's probably not going to work out for you. So just draw every day.
Draw every day. I love that so much. Joe, do you have anything else to kind of add on top of that, or something different to add?
Yeah, I mean, Brian pretty much nailed it. I think it's not something you can necessarily force, like, and this might apply to just like any career or any passion. But if you want to be an artist, or if you want to be a musician or a doctor or a firefighter or anything, I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to be passionate about it. It should be second nature, really. Like, you should feel like, you shouldn't necessarily have to force it. It doesn't mean you have to be great out of the gate, because like Brian says, you can practice, and you should practice every day, but it should never really feel like work. Like, when I was learning to draw and wanting to pursue, a life. I mean, I feel like it's weird for me, because I knew at a very young age what I wanted to do, and not everyone necessarily knows that. I was pretty young when I was like, I love art. I want to be an artist someday. And luckily, I was very fortunate to have very supportive, encouraging parents in that regard. And not everyone has that either. But the fact that I was passionate and I just wanted to draw all the time and make art and draw Star Wars characters and draw comic book characters. And then I had parents who encouraged that and took me to art courses and nurtured that. So in that regard, I mean, I feel very, very lucky and fortunate to be able to, art never really came, it was never really hard for me, but I still wanted to do it every day. I still wanted to draw and paint and color. When everyone else was outside playing football, I'd rather be inside drawing Star Wars. And so, but that's how I knew, like, hey, like someday if I'm going to make a living at this, once I got to high school and I had to start thinking about a career, I was like, I'm just going to do this. Like, this is what I've always done. This is who I am. I had no other like paths in front of me. It was just ingrained in my psyche. Like, I need to be an artist. I need to draw. I need to paint. I need to make art. So I had that kind of passion or enthusiasm, which just made me, having that helped me to draw and paint every day. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something, both of your kind of testaments to that and advice to beginning it coming from your own experience. It is just that you got to follow your passion, notion of you've got to go with your gut and go with what feels fuels your drive and motivation. And I think more people need to listen to that in what their gut's saying.
It's not always as practical for some people, because there are hurdles and roadblocks, and in my case I didn't really have to second guess it, but I know that does happen for a lot of artists, and they question, but so I can't speak to that necessarily, but I can speak to the passion side of it. Like, even now when I do Star Wars work or any illustration work, it never really feels like work, because it feels like what I'm meant to do and I enjoy it so much.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I mean, just the connection with, you're connecting something that you would love, the movies of Star Wars, with a career. And what you just said there, Joe, of it doesn't feel like work to you, because you're just loving it so much. But I love that so much. Brian, what would you say to this as well, of following your passion and this combination of your love of Star Wars and finding a career in it?
Well, I mean, everything Joe said is right on. And the same thing, I never questioned it. I never thought that I was going to be a doctor or lawyer or anything. I mean, I'm sure I was the biggest disappointment to my father when I didn't like sports and things like that. But it just it was always art, right? It was always art from day one. You know, whether it was kindergarten with coloring books, or it was watching Bob Ross on television, or later really discovering, like, you know, real artists and illustrators, like Joe was saying about, you know, Ralph McQuarrie and things like that, is that there you just have this like singular thing inside of you. And I really feel it's like, this is how I communicate. I'm not a public speaker. I can't write fiction stories, right? But the way that I can tell stories and communicate is with my artwork, and it's where my voice really lies. And I would say that if someone was thinking themselves of an art career, or for their child or whatever, that's maybe what to look for in them, is that, you know, do they communicate visually? Do they communicate with their art? And that might be a sign that they have a future in art. And I would just one more thought is that, you know, everything we interact with is designed, whether it's on our phone or our computer screen, or, you know, out in the real world, packaging, street signs, and everything. So we talk about being artists and working with Star Wars, and that can kind of sound glamorous, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other art careers out there where people can be very, very, very successful. So you don't have to be like, oh, it's this one thing, or I'll never be an artist. I think there's a big spectrum of art careers available.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I didn't, as much as I love Star Wars as a child, and I had tons of drawings of Star Wars art my entire life, I didn't start out as a Star Wars illustrator for Lucasfilm. I mean, I knew that I loved comics. I wanted to do comics. So I started my path there, which led to other kinds of illustration work, which led to eventually pretty quickly to Star Wars. And then I built off of that, but I wasn't doing just Star Wars either. Even in my Star Wars career, I'm still doing, even now I'm working on other properties and other kinds of illustration, Stranger Things and Marvel. But I mean, it's all related now, but more or less, but it was never just, you know, I built off of everything I did to get to this point, and I'm still doing that. I'm still, you know, using other talents and abilities to keep making art, you know, wherever I can to make a living at it.
Yeah, it's an incredible kind of journey, because it's, you know, there's a lot of planning and drive, but there's also left up to what opportunities come your way, and what you make of it, definitely, as well.
Exactly.
Now, a name that you've both mentioned, which I would love to bring up and kind of talk about, is Ralph McQuarrie. Beautiful conceptual art of Star Wars, and Star Wars, as I said in my intro, it is a renowned, you know, front runner of a very certain way of having cinematography, and a certain way of shooting something, and a certain way of symbolizing and presenting visual ideas. How much of an influence of not only just your love of the movies and the story and the fantasy of it, but how much of in an artistic way has Star Wars influenced you as an artist? Joe, I'll go with you first on this one. So, you know, how did the art of Star Wars, you know, in the cinematography, in the Ralph McQuarrie's work, even, how did that influence your particular style, or what did you gain from seeing this artwork of Star Wars?
I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think it's kind of twofold with the answer, because when I was young and when these movies were coming out and the Star Wars films were being released, you know, Topps would put out the Star Wars trading cards, and you know, like those orange, green, and blue colored trading cards that, you know, came with the waxy gum. To break your teeth on it now.
Yeah, right.
Even back then. But so as a kid, you know, I'd see the Star Wars, you know, the first Star Wars movie, and then for the next few years, I was collecting these trading cards, and in these cards were production paintings and artwork. They weren't all screen captures from the film. Some of the trading cards were actually production artwork. And I remember looking at these trading cards as a young Star Wars fan with my imagination, and seeing these production paintings by Ralph McQuarrie, or these sketches by Joe Johnston, and it was really that's where I was like, what are these Star Wars? I mean, I couldn't tell if they were photos because they were so realistic and they were colorful. And I'm like, but these scenes are slightly different than the ones I remember in the movie. So I remember being fascinated by Ralph McQuarrie's artwork at a very young age. And then the other part of that, I mean, that's one influence to it. But then the other side of that is, as I got older and I began to almost become a Star Wars art historian, as I'm, because I'm collecting the Star Wars sketchbooks and I have all the Star Wars Marvel comics. And it's when I began to realize that at an early age, probably in high school, that, or even college, in the Star Wars art books, the Art of Star Wars, the Art of Empire, the Art of Jedi, that there really wouldn't be any Star Wars films whatsoever if it wasn't for Ralph McQuarrie's contributions. I mean, if you distill Star Wars down to two things, it's George Lucas and Ralph McQuarrie, because he was the visual stylist, the visual language for George's imagination. So those Star Wars films wouldn't have been made without Ralph's production paintings. So so that began like another level of appreciation and inspiration for Ralph's work, because I mean, there are so many great designers like Joe Johnston or all these other artists who worked on the Star Wars films, but it's really Ralph and his production paintings that he did for the trilogy that really inspired me and influenced me and made me realize how, crucial he was to this thing I loved so much, which was Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you saying that he had that there wouldn't be Star Wars if there wasn't Ralph McQuarrie. Yeah, I actually really agree with that. I don't know how good of an artist George was, but I don't.
He was an aspiring illustrator. George was a frustrated illustrator. He wanted
a frustrated illustrator. Okay.
Yeah, I think before he got in his car accident at a young age, I mean, that was a path that he, and you can read about all this and stuff, but he wanted to be an illustrator. He's a big fan of illustration. He collects, artwork, not just from Star Wars artists, but from, Rockwell and Wyeth and all these world famous illustrators. He owns, a lot of that artwork, which will be in a museum in California soon, in Los Angeles for the George Lucas Narrative Museum. But yeah, he wanted to be an artist and illustrator. And I think once his path changed to cinema, he still had the mindset of an artist, of an illustrator. And I think that's why he worked so well with Ralph to kind of create that visual language of Star Wars. Like they worked in tandem and hand in hand. So even if he couldn't necessarily draw or paint as well as Ralph, I mean, he definitely had the mind of an illustrator.
Yeah, he just needed someone to put it on paper for him. Yeah, definitely. Brian, what do you think to this, narrative of the art of Star Wars and the influence of it, and how it personally influenced you as well? What how has that manifested for you?
Well, I clearly echo everything Joe says, and then I'll just add to that. I was always really interested in how the films were made, and that beyond Star Wars, right? Disney films, Star Wars, where the behind the scenes stuff. And so I think as a kid, we didn't have the internet yet. We had things like Popular Mechanics magazines, where they would do a behind the scene of doing the map paintings for Star Wars, or how the, a behind the scenes of like how the animatronics worked and that sort of thing. So getting that glimpse behind the scenes in the world of the people who are making Star Wars happen, I think is equally inspiring to me as the artwork itself, because you get to see these craftspeople, doing stop motion animation, creating map paintings, costumes, special, all this stuff combined. And I found that really exciting. I'm like, oh, these are people who are like making magic, right? They're creating magic for the screen. So I found that really inspiring. And I find that it still, to this day, influences my artwork, because you think about something like, the Hoth scene with the AT-ATs or whatever. Yeah, conceptually, we can take a step back and be like, oh, those are, stop motion animation and they're in front of models and blah, blah, and all the stuff. We've seen all the behind the scenes pictures. We understand how it works. But when you're watching the movie, you're not thinking about any of that.
Yeah.
You're in the moment.
Real.
It's real. Exactly.
That
so,
it's 100 foot high. Yes. It's that
exactly.
big. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I think about artwork in a way, is like not necessarily realism, but believability, right? How do we create things that are believable inside the Star Wars universe? And that's kind of something that I carry with me all the time. Is anytime I have a project, it's like, I don't want to just create an illustration. I want to create something that's believable, that feels authentic, that resonates with other Star Wars fans. And that's the takeaway for me.
Yeah, it is fantastic. And I think it is a testament to the influence of the visual elements of Star Wars. And it is such a visual medium. And one of my favorite things in Star Wars art that I don't know who first said this, but I wish I could quote them on it, but talking about how Star Wars is silhouettes, and especially talking about the characters and the costuming. Star Wars is silhouettes, and you should be able to tell every Star Wars character from their silhouette. And I love that whole idea.
Yeah, that's the George Lucas idea.
Yeah, is that yeah. So it was George. Hey, yeah. It's so telling. It's so symbolic. It's not just how flashy can we make this, how intense can we make this. It's how subtle we can make this. And I remember ages ago on Twitter, I was going on this big rant about how Star Wars is actually really subtle. And as much as it's an epic space battle, I really love when Star Wars is subtle. And I think that's a perfect example there of talking about
that's a testament. That's a testament to George's ability as a storyteller, because that whole silhouette idea came from him, where, you should be able, I mean, that's why he was able to create so many iconic characters, because he distilled and simplified everything. So to your point, when Star Wars is at its best, it's when it's at its most pure, when it's not, like everything is the heroes look like this, the bad guys look like, even though it's subtle, it's like, well, yeah, the bad guys are reminiscent of Nazis and the heroes are reminiscent of samurai or monk with the way they dress, but it's not, it's all done very subtly. And, so the design and style and the visual language of Star Wars, and which is even evident in the prequels, how visually imaginative those films are. I mean, that comes from George's, just his amazing ability as a storyteller to kind of be able to tell a story visually, and you get it immediately by whether it's a silhouette or an iconic look or a certain fashion choice or the way a certain vehicle looks, or like that. That's eventually that all comes from George's imagination. So yeah,
and you can tell where you are in the whole entire galaxy just from standing in one spot and looking around. And, I love
every planet has
that.
its own unique look or feel. Yeah,
absolutely. Now I want to bring us up to speed of we've been talking about the history of the art of Star Wars, but let's talk about what is happening now and what's happening now for you guys as well, because we have Star Wars Celebration for the first time in 3 years coming up in 28 days, I believe it is. 28 days, less than a month away. We have Star Wars Celebration, and you both are going to be there. You're going to have a role with Celebration, which is super exciting. So let's talk about that, because we have the Star Wars art show. So this is the official art exhibition of Star Wars Lucasfilm affiliated artists. And you both have works in this art show. So tell us a little bit about what that means, even dates and times for people that are going to be at Celebration. And tell us a little bit about the art show.
Brian should fill us in on that, I think.
Sure, I can do that. So by the time you're seeing this, it should be May 2nd or after. And you can go to the Dark Ink Art and Acme Archives website and pre-order the Star Wars Celebration artwork. But what is that? So Lucasfilm has selected a number of artists to create original exclusive illustrations just for Star Wars Celebration. Each of those are limited editions. They're limited in number to 250 pieces or less. And they're only available to people attending Star Wars Celebration. And it's sponsored by Acme Archives, who will be doing the official pre-sale. But the big caveat to all of this is they sell out. They sell out fast.
Yes, absolutely.
People you can't assume you're going to show up at Star Wars Celebration and just like, oh, I'll just go see Joe and Brian and pick up the artwork, because it could be gone already. So what we're telling everybody, especially after not having an in-person celebration in so long, I think the demand is going to be really high. So everyone will want to go to the Dark Geek Art website and put in those pre-orders. It helps the artist and it helps you too, because then you won't have to wait in as many lines when you get to Celebration.
Oh,
you can just go and pick up the artwork. Yeah. Come see us, hang out, get our autographs, and instead of waiting in line all day, you'll just be able to pick it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's take a look at a couple of these works. So Joe, we have yours first. Let's put this full screen so we can appreciate it in full.
Awesome.
Talk us through this piece a little bit. You know, when was this created, and you know, why did you choose a classic Han and Chewie moment?
So once we're given the approval to submit designs to Lucasfilm as, you know, potential Star Wars art show participants for Celebration, this was one of the designs I submitted. You know, obviously inspired by Solo, A Star Wars Story, and which is a movie I feel does not get enough appreciation or love. I think fans are finally coming around to it. I think when it originally was released, you know, everyone assumed it's a Star Wars movie, it'll succeed, it'll be great, but not enough people saw it in the theater, and then a lot of fans had kind of slept on it. And then I think now it's been rediscovered, and a lot of fans appreciate the movie for what a classic Star Wars adventure it is.
Oh yeah.
And plus there was a lot of pressure on Alden Ehrenreich as a young Harrison Ford. So, you know, a lot of people were very critical of that. Just, you know, those are huge shoes to fill. You know, Han Solo, arguably the most iconic movie character next to Indiana Jones or Darth Vader or Batman. I mean, it's Han Solo. So
favorite space cowboy.
Yeah. I mean, he's such a iconic, legendary character that inspired so many other similar type characters in sci-fi and fantasy and fandom. But I loved it. I loved Solo. I loved seeing the origin of the friendship of Han and Chewie and how they got the Falcon. So I was inspired to create this illustration that shows, you know, I kind of imagine it sort of taking place after the first film, and we're seeing Han and Chewie, you know, taking off into hyperspace on another adventure. So I wanted to capture the feel of Solo, but then just, you know, not make it specific to the movie, and just really try to capture the friendship and the dynamic action of these characters in the really cool, you know, retro fitted design of the Falcon that we got in Solo. So the very sleeker version. So yeah, that was sort of my idea to absolutely. And sort of the impetus of this artwork, of this painting. So
absolutely, and we'll keep saying it as saying down below as well. These are all available for pre-order. Like Brian said, you want to be doing the pre-order so you're not stressing about missing out at Celebration. And Brian, we'll look at one of your works, which I gave a little sneak peek before as well as we were talking about.
Yes, you did.
Your
that was pretty
works.
Cool.
It is a stunning work. It is. I love this. It is so classic. I love how it's this date night, a Black Spire outpost. It's a beautiful look. Tell us a little bit about this artwork as well.
Well, I'm just so excited to finally be able to share this with everybody. Joe and I and a bunch of our friends from Disney and Lucasfilm and the world of comic books, we went to Galaxy's Edge for the very first time in 2019 and had a blast. And one of the things we got to do was hang out at nighttime and see the fireworks. while we're eating our Ronto roasters while the fireworks are going off. And it was just kind of a magical night. And I went home and started doing I went back to the hotel room that night and started doing doodles in my sketchbook. And it just kind of sat in my sketchbook forever. And then when Celebration was coming up, I kind of got that out and dusted it off and started thinking about what I could do with it. And I really wanted to pay homage to the date night at Disney posters from the 1950s. So I sort of took Black Spire Outpost and Batuu and went with this like 1950s, very wholesome, we're going to go out on a date night vibe, and just kind of bring those two together. And hopefully people are inspired to imagine what their dream date night at Batuu would look like, and just imagine the possibilities of being there with your significant other, whether they're in real life or from a galaxy far, far away, and strolling through Batuu and checking out the Falcon and just seeing the spires under the starlight and just having a magical, wonderful night.
I love that. It's, date night. It is that classic look, and yeah, it is very 60s, and it's got that kind of almost a retro feel to it, but not fully. It still feels very inverse. I love it. So again, you can get both of these and plus a couple others via Acme Archives. It's with they're a great company. I've heard lots of great things about them. A lot of great artworks over there in lots of different fandoms. But Acme Archives at Dark Ink Art, which Dark Ink Art, it was a mouthful to say. I had to practice saying that a couple of times. I kept twisting it up.
Doesn't roll off the tongue easy.
But that's where you can pre-order it. And this right now, when this episode is going live, is when it is available. Pre-orders are available up until May 16th, so a couple weeks before Celebration. So again, if you want to get your hands on these pieces and check out some more, the link for those is going to be the first thing in the description box. So just scroll down a little tiny bit and you'll see the link there to get your hands on those works. But it looks stunning. And like we said, you guys are going to be at Celebration and you're keen to meet and talk with people and get autographs and meet them. So if people want to meet you, can people just walk up and say hi?
Yeah, definitely. I'll have a booth on the show floor. It's booth 2311. I'm going to be right near the Hasbro booth and right near the Funko booth. So it's all, right in a pretty nice hot spot right there with lots of traffic. People can come right up to my booth. Now, Brian and I are going to be busy signing and selling, and if you're patient and we'll definitely get to everyone, because Celebration can be pretty crazy when everyone is in there all at once, and things can get kind of hectic. But we definitely try to spend time talking with everyone who stops by the booth, even if it's just a quick hi or if they want something signed. Definitely just hang out and we'll knock all that out and say hi to everyone, and it's such an awesome time.
Definitely don't be shy. Come up and say hi. I'll be at a table inside the Acme Archives art show area. They will have my exclusive there. They will have a handful of other things that I've done Star Wars in the past available as well. So like Joe said, grab the art, come by, autograph, talk about Star Wars. I'm sure we'll have some exciting things to talk about with Obi-Wan. And maybe we'll all sneak off Friday night and go to Star Wars night at Disneyland.
Actually, Brian and I we're going to be at Star Wars night for that, which is it's Disneyland After Dark Star Wars night. So I think it's Friday during Celebration. So you can catch us.
Maybe we'll see you there.
Yeah, maybe you'll find us there with our Grogu hats and our blue milk and all that jazz.
You got the whole get up going. Absolutely. That is fantastic, guys. Well, I think we can start to wrap it up there. Thank you so much both for coming on the show, talking your Star Wars culture with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. If people want to follow you personally on social media and know what is happening with Brian and what is happening with Joe, where can people find you both on social media? Brian, where can people find you?
So I'm Octopolis pretty much everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere else. So just Octopolis. I can see it's right there in front of me. So type it in and you'll find me.
And there you'll be. I love it. And Joe, where can people find more of you?
Same with me. I mean, Joe Corroney. If you go to joecorroney.com, just put a .com after my name. That links to all my social media. I have my online art store. I have Patreon if you feel like following and supporting me there. I have a YouTube channel that I need to use a little bit more, but I'm very active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm always sharing and posting my art and Star Wars news because I'm, first and foremost a fan, just like everyone else, even though I get to play in the sandbox. So, but I'm always posting fun Star Wars stuff, and so is Brian. So we're pretty active online.
Awesome. Absolutely. Go chuck them a follow. And again, you can just search them up, but also if you want to find their direct links, it'll all be in the description below, both their social medias and also the websites. Again, pre-order these bad boys. Look how good that looks. That is looking fantastic. So get your hands on them. They are going to be at Celebration for pickup, but pre-order's only until May 16th. So be sure to hit that link down below so you can have your copy as well. Well, we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for coming again on the show. It has been so fun. And I can't wait to meet you in person, not over a video camera at Celebration. It's going to be fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. I can't wait.
Yeah, thanks for the awesome questions too. I love talking about Star Wars history and Star Wars art.
We can do it forever, hey.
Yeah,
we could do this for hours. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And if you want to see more of us here at Star Wars Culture, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and you can follow us on social media at SW Culture Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And Jordan is doing some podcast work over there as well. And we got interviews here on the channel. So be sure you're up to date on all our social media so you know what's going down with Star Wars culture. That is it for today, and we'll see you next time. And as always, may the Force be with you.